all. Welcome to one more show. This is Dr. Mubin Sayed. And guess who is with us? We have Dr. Paul Marik once again with us. Dr. Paul Marik, Dr. Marik, welcome.
Thank you, my hero, Dr. Mo, Dr. Mubin, or Dr. Mo, or Dr. Bean. I don't know what to call you. You're the King Bean.
And you are the Emperor. So
Yes.
I am so excited. I'm so glad that we have Dr. Paul Marik with us. And today's topic is very important as well, and that is intermittent fasting. Dr. Paul Marik and I have been discussing over the phone the intermittent fasting, and Paul has been talking about, hey, there are studies or there are folks, physicians who say that women and intermittent fasting, one has to be careful for their reproductive systems, physiology, and function. So we've been looking at various papers together, and I wanted to make sure that we can have that discussion with you as well. Before we go to those discussions, I want to quickly show the references here. So first of all, this is FLCCC.net site. So you can type FLCCC.net or COVID19criticalcare.com, and you would come on to this page where you have, if you go to the top here, these are various treatment protocols. And today we're going to look at one of the protocol as well that Dr. Marik has updated for this intermittent fasting discussion that we are doing today as well. Here are some studies as a reference. And in the description of this video, there are links to these studies as well. This document that you're seeing, this is the I Recover protocol that is also on flccc.net. So with this introduction, Dr. Marik, once again, welcome. So tell me this about the intermittent fasting and women. What is most important here in this topic?
Yeah, so thanks for inviting me and thanks for talking about this. So it really is an important topic. So for a number of reasons. Firstly, we know now that autophagy or autophagy, however one said, is probably the most powerful mechanism for improving cellular function, for prolonging lifespan, for improving overall health, for preventing disease, for preventing Parkinson's, for preventing Alzheimer's, for limiting diabetes, for treating metabolic disease is a powerful, truly powerful mechanism. And I don't think most people or physicians realize the importance of autophagy in overall health. It's truly, it's a gift of nature because nature gave us a way to self-heal. It does truly remarkable things and likely prevents cancer. If you activate autophagy, it's going to reduce your risk of cancer, degenerative disease, promote health. And we've now figured out that autophagy is really important in the vaccine injured because this is a way the cell can get rid of spike protein as well as all the other bad metabolic consequences. However, what we've discovered is that if you look at the demographics of vaccine injured, most of them, 80% are women, and most of them are between the ages of 20 and 50. So they're in women in the reproductive years. And so what we do is we put out a protocol and we get feedback. We're very open to feedback from clinicians, from patients, from practitioners, because, this is an open dialogue. This is an ongoing discussion. It's a process in evolution. And we heard from many women that women just don't tolerate intermittent fasting as well as do men. So obviously that becomes problematic because I think intermittent fasting is probably the most important intervention for the vaccine injured woman and for women to maintain health. So the question then becomes, what are the true facts and what can women do to do intermittent fasting in a safe and effective way? And so that's part of the discussion we've been having and part of the research that we've done.
Got it.
So that's really the opening. And, we have discussed a few papers. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of science and we need to follow the science. It's really important because people sprout forth all kinds of nonsense. And, we're not talking about Fauci's science. We're talking about true science, which is reproducible findings that makes common sense. And because a lot of people just talk out of their rear end, they make statements that they can't support and back up. So it's really important to follow the science. And when you don't know, you have to be honest and say, you know what? we really don't know, but this is what we think or what we suggest, so that it opens the door to improvement. You have to be honest, you have to be sincere, and you have to follow the best science.
Absolutely. And Dr. Marik, if I can add this one comment here to this physiology and pathology of the spike protein stuck in the cells. So, one comment is that our immune system actually has no way of kind of figuratively put its hand inside a cell that has, let's say, spike or some virus or some bacteria and remove that trash out of it. There is no mechanism. So the only two mechanisms that are possible are one, either the immune system cells, for example, natural killer or cytotoxic T cells or neutrophils, especially NK and cytotoxic T cells. They will come over, they will identify a cell that is sick, and then they would kill that cell, the whole cell. Or the other possible mechanism is that the cell itself, the one, imagine I'm a cell that has a spike protein in it. The cell itself, the stressor sensors recognize that there is a problem in me, and the cell decides to clean up the trash. Cell can actually trigger autophagy in the stressful state by itself as well. However, in case of spike protein, there is something really sinister of the spike protein, if I can say that. And that is spike protein's molecule tries to, or it has those little structures there that turn off many inflammatory pathways or stress pathways within the cell. So the cells is going to sit in there with the least defense offered, and now spike or the virus is just sitting and having fun in there and causing lots of problems. This is why I think it becomes really important to tap into the mechanism of autophagy, because that allows this trash to be removed. Does this make sense, Dr. Marik?
Yeah, so what you say is really true. I mean, the spike is probably the most evil, toxic protein that we know. And what the spike does is it actually switches off, as you say, natural killer cells, cytotoxic T cells designed to kill it. So it's a way of self-preservation. And the spike is so devious that is actually interfering with the host mechanism to get rid of it in terms of its own self-preservation. So, using those arms of the immune system, it's very difficult to get rid of spike. So the only way that we know, the predominant way, is to try and help the cell break down the spike through autophagy. And that's why we think it's such an important mechanism. And so, as we said, for reasons we'll talk about, it seems to be much easier for men to do. But, I think this can be applied to women because it's really important, since they take the brunt of this disease and they need to, adapt the way they do intermittent fasting to activate autophagy, in a more physiologic way. And so, what we always speak about is physiology. We talk about physiology and pathology because unless you understand physiology, you're not talking real medicine. So it has to be physiologically based. So I agree with you. So, you've
Totally makes sense.
very clearly in your shows how autophagy works. So basically, there are a number of phases and stages. It's a really complex molecular pathway with multiple genes. So there are at least 30 different, autophagy genes and proteins. But that's for another discussion. What we want to talk about is, how we can adapt this, to women. And I think, just to make it simple, I like, as we do, make it as simple as you can. I think that's what Einstein said. Make it as simple as you can, but not any simpler, so that people understand. And the way I look at it is Mtor. So Mtor, which is mammalian target of rapamycin complex, is the metabolic switch in the cell. It is the metabolic switch. So it plays this very important in switching on and switching off autophagy. So I think Mtor acts on ULK proteins and all other kinds of proteins. You don't need to know that. I think all you need to know is Mtor is the basic metabolic switch. And then the question is, how do you switch it on and off? So you want to switch it off, and that activates autophagy. What activates Mtor? It's quite simple. It's sugar, it's insulin, and it's protein. So those are the three molecules or compounds which switch on Mtor. So if you're eating, you switch off autophagy, particularly if you're eating carbohydrates. And we know that the Western diet, we eat all the time. We snack all the time, and we snack on foods that increase your glucose and your insulin. And then what it does effectively is switches off autophagy. So basically, what you're saying is we need to follow a more natural diet where you have periods of fasting where you're not eating glucose, which stimulates insulin, and you're not eating protein, because those are the switches of mTOR. Interestingly enough, you can actually have fat because fat doesn't directly act on mTOR. So, we've spoken about coffee. Coffee activates autophagy. So if you have coffee with a little bit of thick cream, it's actually a way of having something to drink, as you're doing now, without interfering with autophagy. So what we're saying is that people need to reconsider the way they eat. I think slightly different in men and women, but you have to think about activating autophagy. It is the key. It is the single most important key to health, good living, longevity, and being disease-free. It's as simple as that. We have it within ourselves. It's cheap. You don't have to pay anybody to do it.
It actually saves money if you're eating lesser number of times. So then I have a question, and I want to quickly share your statement here as well in the iRecover protocol, that you say a number of studies have suggested that intermittent fasting may not be as beneficial for women as it is for men. So what is behind this, that women are not able to do a similar stretch of intermittent fasting as men?
Yeah, so obviously we don't know everything, it's evolving, but it seems that the hypothalamus pituitary ovarian axis, so that's the axis that controls ovarian function, the release of LH and FSH from the pituitary and the effect on ovaries, very much dependent on nutrition. So we know that women who actually starve themselves become amenorrheic. We know that women with anorexia who starve themselves become amenorrheic. So for reasons not entirely clear, the hormonal axis in women is very sensitive to nutrient supply. And so the experiments in rats, now obviously humans aren't rats, but you can do these experiments. And what they did was alternate day fasting. So alternate day fasting is a more aggressive form of intermittent fasting, which we don't recommend, because in women at least, because it's much more aggressive. So what they found in alternate day eating or alternate day fasting is that it decreased the secretion of growth hormone, FSH, LH, many of the ovarian hormones, and that these mice actually stopped menstruating, became infertile, and there was a decrease in ovarian size. So this was a study in mice, which does lead credence to this concept. But I must add that this is a more aggressive form of intermittent fasting, which we don't recommend. Then there was a study in humans in which they again did alternate day fasting. So alternate day fasting is a more aggressive form of fasting. And they compared men versus women. And again, in men, it actually had a beneficial effect in terms of glucose and insulin resistance. In women, the glucose went up and it didn't improve insulin resistance. So I think this provides the scientific basis for us to rethink what we recommend in women. So maybe you could show your graphic. So I think the bottom line is it's important to do in women that, I don't think you can say women shouldn't do this, but I think you have to adapt the protocol to women, and you need to go slow and you need to be cautious, particularly in menstruating women. So in men, you can be more aggressive. So what we recommend in women is to start off with a 12-hour fast. So that's pretty easy to do. So basically, you don't eat for 12 hours, and you can work out which window works best for you. During that 12 hours, you can drink fluid, you can drink coffee, but please don't drink juices. Juices are really bad, or sodas. So you fast for 12 hours, and it's best that you don't eat for about 4 to 6 hours before going to sleep, because as we've discussed before, activating autophagy while you're sleeping is a very, very, very important process because it helps regenerate your neurons while you're sleeping. And that if you eat before you go to sleep, it prevents autophagy happening at night. And autophagy is very important for regeneration of neurons. So what we say in women is, start off slowly, do it for 3 non-consecutive days a week, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and do it for 12 hours. And what's really important is that it's intermittent fasting coupled with real food. So what I mean is eat food, not processed food. So you want to make sure it's a healthy, wholesome diet, real food. What we would prefer most is a low carbohydrate fat diet. So something which generates ketones. So ketosis is actually really good. It activates autophagy. It does a lot of really good things. It improves insulin resistance. And you can do this slowly. So you can gradually increase the hours and gradually decrease the carbs. But you certainly want to avoid high carbohydrate processed foods. Donuts, bagels, chips, chocolates. These are toxins. People talk about cyanide and all kind of DDT as being toxic. In Robert Lustig's book, he makes it quite clear that carbohydrates are toxins. And so what you need to do is reduce these processed foods that are toxic. So in the 12-hour period that you eat, you want to eat real healthy foods, which, if it looks like a food, it's food. If it comes in a box and has a label, it's not food. So you want to eat real food and try and decrease your intake of carbs. And this whole scam, it is a sham of, low fat. This low fat is a complete scam because we know saturated fats and cholesterol are perfectly fine. It's a fraud perpetuated by the food industry. So you want to avoid things which say low fat, because if it's low in fat, it's high in sugar. So the key is avoid carbohydrates, avoid processed sugar, avoid processed seed oil, eat for 12 hours and fast for 12 hours, and eat wholesome food. And I think that's a very good starting point. It does a really, that itself, I think, is a very good starting point. And then, if you want to be a little bit more fancy, and you can take a number of nutraceuticals which activate autophagy. So what we're talking about in the 12-hour fast period is you activating autophagy. And so to supercharge autophagy, there are compounds which help the body to activate autophagy. We know coffee is one. We know spermidine is another one. We know resveratrol is another one. So if you took a spermidine while you were fasting, it may supercharge autophagy. The worst thing to do is to have a carbohydrate snack, because that's completely switches off. It acts on the Mtor switch. It completely switches off autophagy. So that's why the snacking business is so bad. So it's just a matter of getting into the habit, thinking about things differently. It's not a difficult thing to do. And people find that once they actually start such a pattern, it increases their energy. They feel better. Their mentation is better. Their cognition is better. Their life is better. So why would you not want to do something which makes you feel better and makes you healthier? And then, of course, the other thing is a little bit of exercise. We know that exercise activates autophagy. So when you're in your fasting period, you want to go for a walk or do a little bit of exercise. And so you're now boosting, you're supercharging the autophagy process. So I think people have to think about autophagy. Stop counting calories. Calorie counting is a stupid exercise. It serves no purpose. So I think people need to think about autophagy as a way of saving their life. And then, as you've showed, once they've got this initial program under control and they find that they can tolerate it, it doesn't affect with their menses, then what they can do is they can experiment a little bit by increasing the numbers of fasting days and increasing the window and basically seeing what happens. And, if they tolerate it, fine, that's cool. If they find that it's causing menstrual irregularities, then go back to where you were before. So, every patient is different. There's no single recipe. So patients have to figure out what works best for them. So, we're presenting a guidebook to help them get started. So that's what we recommend. And I think, the data now shows that autophagy is singly the most important mechanism for promoting health and well-being.
Got it. Excellent. Thank you. And talking about the exercise, I believe that, as you said, light exercise. If you take the exercise and think I am within the autophagy window and let me just go do something really hard to kind of boost the effect, that can actually have a negative effect by reducing the nutrients very fast, by taking the energy away and causing stress hormones to be released. That will in turn stop the autophagy and such mechanisms. So light exercise that allows stress on the cell, or stress meaning the cell's shape changes. For example, when you are doing curls, your biceps muscles are changing shape. Those shape changes of the cells also cause autophagy to occur. You don't have to be rigorous about it. You don't have to be hard on the cells. Does this make sense as well, Dr. Marik?
I think, we should do, what nature made us to do. So I think walking actually is an outstanding form of exercise, particularly if you can do it outside. Obviously in winter it's a little bit challenging, but, people like you who live in California or Florida or somewhere nice weather, just go out for a walk in the sun. It has enormous physiological benefits, both in terms of the sun and in terms of mobility and in terms of walking. There's good data that show that people just walk have a much lower risk of developing Alzheimer's disease and degenerative disease. So walking is, what we've been designed to do. I don't think the human was designed to go to a gym and push 300 pounds of weight. That's not what we were designed to do. We were designed to walk and be mobile. And, that's what we should do. Stretching exercises is really good, doing flexibility exercises. But I think pushing heavy weights, some resistance training is fine, but you don't want to overdo it.
So this is the primary message for today, that when women are doing intermittent fasting, especially those in the reproductive age, they should be careful and have a structure and keep watching for them physiological functions and then decide how to move it.
There are some practitioners who suggest that you should cycle the intermittent fasting according to the days of your menstrual cycle. So this seems to be popular out there. Unfortunately, there's no data to support it. So, what I'm saying is it's something to consider, but we don't have data. So it is what it is, and hopefully people will study this. So there are some practitioners who suggest that in the first 14 days of the menstrual cycle, that it's okay for women to do intermittent fasting pretty vigorously. And then from day 10 to day 15 or 16 to slow down a bit. And then in the last progesterone phase, not to fast at all. So, we can find no data to support such a program or protocol. But I think if women want to try it, I think that's fine. And obviously, we would appreciate any kind of feedback. So it is an alternative way to approach this problem, because I think intermittent fasting is really important in women, particularly in those who are vaccine injured. And so what we need to do is develop protocols that work best for women. And I would suspect that it's very individualized. What works for some women doesn't work for all women. So I think that, like much in life, you have to figure out what works best for you. And so this is something to consider. I just think the bottom line is that intermittent fasting is really important. It's important for women, and they have to maybe go slower, be a little bit more reserved, be more thoughtful, and just see what works best for them.
Totally makes sense. Thank you very much for this as well. So with this, I think we just all love you so much. And what I've observed is people love you and respect you and trust you. And then they would like to hear things from your mouth so that it becomes more verified for them. So thank you very much for all the hard work you've done. Thank you so much for your help. And thank you so much for being here.
So thank you. I want to thank you because you're an inspiration. And I want to thank the Cool Beans because If it wasn't for the cool beans, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing.
Dr. Marik, once again, thank you very much, and goodbye, everyone.
Thanks,